Ladies and gentlemen, we have a legend for this episode of Gridiron and Growth inside the minds of champions. She is Blair Nelson Marlin, not only a former collegiate athlete at Drake University in women's soccer, but she's also the 9 News marketing director. She also manages and has managed over different regions of television, different television shows, brands, news networks, all the things. And lastly, the most recent thing, she won the Outstanding Women in Business Award from the Denver Business Journal. Check out Blair the Brander, a.k.a. Blair Nelson Marlin. Welcome to the show.
I'm gonna have you do that for me every single morning. Like whenever I have a rough morning, I'm gonna call Ryan and just say, "No, all right, warm me up."
My voice would run out with all of the accolades that you have gone. And my favorite thing about you, Blair, you're a fantastic person too.
Oh,
you have fun. Bud. You make people around you laugh. You make people around you better. You listen. I mean, you're on top of your game. How did you get to the top of being a brand person, of knowing brands?
It was actually driving over here thinking about, because Jenna was saying how we're going to talk about my career and the growth and the gridiron. Is that what we're calling this thing? Let's go. I think, for me, it's kind of wild. It's just been a crazy journey. I stumbled into media. Okay. So I didn't even know what I do existed. So part of my goal is also helping people understand that there's marketing and branding within media, local media, and the power of local media. I think, for me, I just always was really passionate about content and storytelling, and now I have a huge megaphone. And so I think I tripped into it. I was really intentional, right? I moved here from Dallas. I've been with my same company 10 years. Tegna, we own 64 TV stations across the entire country. Wow. And so it's been a journey. So it brought me here to Denver, and now it's home for sure.
Love it. You're bringing the energy, can feel the energy, and that's just incredible. Yeah. That's incredible. So what's your favorite part about the job?
I think that I consider what we're doing today work.
Yeah.
Being one, I get the honor to represent one of the strongest brands in the state. So 9 News has been around. We've been around 70 years. And so I have the pleasure to kind of guard it. I'm a safeguard, and we're definitely standing on some giant shoulders here. And I also know when I'm witnessing it too. We have the likes of Tom Green, Kim Christensen, Kyle Clark, the people I've gotten to rub elbows with. They're just so smart, so studied. That is my favorite part, is I don't ever go into that building and leave without learning something. Every single day. And to witness the storytelling that we get to do, we get to capture the heart of Colorado.
Yeah.
That is so cool to me. I look at Peggy at CU Buffs.
Yeah.
She's always with Dion. We've been covering Peggy and her twin sister who just passed the CU for a while. Kim's covered them. I've gotten to witness those stories and see them, and sometimes see them before they even hit the air. That's one of the coolest parts.
That's awesome.
When you talk about brands, branding is something that people spend a ton of money for.
They do, yeah.
They might have a brander, somebody who does branding in the business, but then they'll hire a consultant to look at the brand.
Oh, yeah.
What are 3 key concepts to a successful brand in your illustrious experience?
I think for me, number one, and it's similar to kind of personal beliefs too, is you have to have the core values of the organization. Those are your guiding principles. That is who you hire, how you look at the organization, and people want to align with those internally, and you've got to get that right. So core values, we all have them. It's what you believe, what you stand for. At 9 News, it's integrity. We have 5. It's integrity, it's passion, it's bravery, it's curiosity, and it's inclusion. And we have to exhibit those. We're going to fall short because we're a group of humans, but we have to aspire to reach those every day. So number one for sure is you must know the building blocks of your organization with core values. The second is you have to have a vision. Where are we going? And I think I'm working in this business, not to knock it for a second, but it was startling to me. We didn't really have a vision. We were just kind of moving through the days, and it makes sense, right? You're a 24/7 business. You do not get a break in news. I mean, there's always someone who is anchoring that desk and telling those stories, because there's always stories to tell. But I think what was really fascinating to me was we didn't really know where we were going. We're kind of doing what we did really well, which is telling stories, but we didn't have a vision or a plan, and we've just developed that. And I'm really pleased with that. And that was a group effort. So you have to know where are you going. So you manage the short term and the long term. If you just manage the short term, you may miss a lot. There's a lot left on the table, and there's a lot of opportunity that you don't even know. So you have to have that long-term vision as well. And the third is you have to have the right people with brand.
Yeah. How did you guys come up with that long-term vision, or were you a part of that process? Because I think, to your point, you see that in a lot of organizations, even organizations that are really well ran, is that sometimes they don't have that vision, and sometimes they're wondering, okay, my people aren't inspired. Well, it's hard to be inspired if you don't actually know where you're going. Yeah.
The short-term planning is critical. I mean, we have to obviously plan for our day. I mean, the team right now is working on the newscast that starts at noon right now. They have to do that, okay? But at the end of the day, if they don't know what they want the noon newscast to look like in 2 years, we're going to miss the bullseye. So a lot of it is making sure you manage and build in time for both. And that's how I've kind of built and curated my career, is through strategic planning. So I lead all of that. I lead a lot of workshops. And I know an outside consultant does not do the magic that the inside answers have.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, say that again for the people. Oh, time out. Say, we got to get a button. Hey, say it again for the people.
Yeah, the outside consultants, whether it's an organization or a person, doesn't have the answers. You have the answers. We had the answers.
Yeah.
Our core values are actually completely built by our staff. I had the opportunity to facilitate it. You know what? Here's the truth, Benny. I could have written all the core values, like probably in like 12 hours.
Right.
Like, here it is, rolled it out. You don't get belief. You don't get buy-in. You don't get, I wrote that. I helped write that. So we brought everyone off site, and we created these cross-functional, very diverse groups of individuals, non-managers. And if you were a manager and you were in there, you took your manager hat off. You were just with everyone else. Teammate, full teammate. We're going to develop what we want. We wrestled over words. They wrote the words. And it's harder that way because people are like, gosh, this is hard, and don't I have a day job? But at the end of the day, they're on the wall now, and they're not empty.
I think that's important.
They have meaning and weight to them, and we can hold people accountable to them. It's a beautiful, beautiful tool, because when people understand what the brand is on the inside, the outside starts feeling it.
Yeah. Now, what do you do for people? Because Benny and I know in the NFL, if somebody is not on board with that vision, he gone, right? They're gone. They're not there, right?
Yeah.
How do you handle it in the corporate space? You've got your values, and maybe somebody's just not they're stuck in letting the vision, be a part of their future success.
Yeah.
How do you handle those people?
So, a lot of it is just the core values and mission is just a tool to hold people accountable. Even the general manager, all the way up to the corner office, right? It's something that an entry-level employee can say, hey, you're not in line with the core values to their manager. That's power to giving power to everyone. If it was just a top-down thing, then people would have to like buy in and get in line or whatever. But you've created this accountability culture that allows people to say, hey, we decided that together. We said we were going to be brave. We're dragging our feet on this decision. And it can be a big or small, or let's go big. Let's try this new project, or we're going to cover it this way, a unique way. And if you don't have those to lean into, you won't see it. When people don't align with them, though, they'll find their way out usually. If the majority built them and the majority holds them accountable, the minority starts to weed out.
Yep.
And when you realize you're part of the minority, you're the cranky one, or you're the one that doesn't fit, or you're the one who's not brave, you feel it.
Yeah.
Of course, there's those that lack self-awareness, and self-awareness is like a huge thing for me. I think it's one of the most important leadership principles. But what I notice with people is that when they're like, oh, I'm the odd man out.
Yeah, self-select
and so
out.
they self-select. So I think the goal is obviously you don't want a regrettable turnover, right? You don't want to lose people. You don't want to lose. I mean, it's that simple. But when people come and say, I'm leaving, they didn't decide that day. They've been thinking about it probably about 6 months.
Yeah.
In the corporate America, it is, especially with the talent market today. So they find their way out, or they're managed out. I mean, it's really kind of that simple, because you have vision and you have values that everyone built.
I want to go back and double click on the strategic planning process and the fact that you're planning from the inside. As leaders who are listening to this podcast and people who are thinking about their own life and strategically planning, what's some of the framework in terms of, okay, you start with the vision, you have your core values, and then where does it go?
Well, number one is it's a lot of corporate buzzwords, but it gets down to really just having very focused goals. Like at the end of the year, we have a 3-year plan. First of all, it's a breathing document. Whether it's actually a document or not, it's a breathing piece of work.
Can change.
Because it can and it should. And if it doesn't, it has dust on it, it's in a drawer somewhere, and it's not believed in and bought in.
Right.
So you absolutely have to have something that's nimble. And you have to be honest, when you add things to it, I'm a big believer you should take 2 off. Because if you don't take a scalpel to it and you don't get super clear about what you want to do, then you won't go anywhere. Right? He who aims at nothing hits it every time, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that for us with our strategic planning as we realize we're trying to do too much. I think prioritization in organizations is a really hard thing, particularly ours, because we don't have a physical, product.
Right.
We're storytellers. So there's so many places you could go with that. I mean, we're journalists. We tell the truth, but there's so many, what is the truth? There's so many avenues to take. So you have to get really focused on what moves the needles. And obviously we're accountable to results. Yeah. We want to get people to consume our products. We want to get people to download our apps. We want to get people to watch news wherever they watch, however they watch. And you can get us in any way you want.
Yeah.
And quick plug for those that think local news is dying. Totally not dying.
Not dying.
In fact, we are stronger than we've ever been before, just not in the traditional sense.
No
not
coincidence
sitting-
that because you're there, right?
Of course, no.
It's not a shock, is it, man? I mean, come on.
She's a legend.
A lot of it is people just don't sit on the couch anymore and just click to watch the news, right? Those days are a little bit gone, but people are more involved and more informed than ever before. They just have options. Yeah. And a lot of it's their time has shifted. You can't convince me otherwise. Most people are watching something through a glass at night. It's just how are we capturing their attention? So a lot of it is focusing on where can we drive results.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you guys adapt to that? That people are like, well, local news is dead. How did you guys adapt to that in real time?
Well, it's a work in progress because, 10 years ago we would have said podcast what? No one really listened to podcasts. So you have to keep going back to that long-term vision. You have to understand what are the trends? How are people consuming? So, we talk about that often. I think it's also just making sure the effort you put in, how you arrange your human capital, in other words, your people. Are you all working on the right things? Are you all swimming in the right directions? Mm-hmm. So sometimes I notice organizations get very, very splintered. So it's I'm going to put 2 people on this thing and 1 person on this thing. And then all of a sudden you've got 100 things, but are any of them that good? Mm-hmm. So a lot of it has been focus for us, prioritization for us. I think we've also really tried to make sure we don't go all in. The other day we were should 9 News launch a TikTok? I'm we have 40 other brands. Let's get those ones right.
Yeah.
I think this to keep up is almost part of the fallacy of it all too. It's don't keep up. Do what you do really well. Mm-hmm. Instead of try to be everywhere, do what you do really well. Look at Next with Kyle Clark. That show's absolutely amazing. People love it. They consume it day in and day out. And it's because it's a really good show with a lot of effort and a lot of resource behind it to make it what it is.
What you talked about some of the trends now. What are some of the trends that people aren't paying attention to? You talk about podcasts. I literally, within that 10-year window, was at a radio station and said, hey, we got to break the show up and record it on podcasts. They're like, oh, no one listens to podcasts, right? Yeah. So it's there's a lack of vision often, especially in this digital age. But what are some things in terms of how we, the people, like viewing things now that people might be missing?
Yeah, basically, are we doing the right thing?
Yes, well, you're doing the right thing. Create good content, and honestly, that is the right thing. But for me, what's astonishing is we've created, and I don't want to get too tech nerdy on you, but we've created 20 different cable networks now. From everyone consumes news, but they consume it in so many different ways. So what I mean by that is they might watch it on their Roku, they might watch it on YouTube TV, they might watch it here. Cables only penetrates about 23% of the market now. So
what?
Yes.
Wow.
But people are still watching it the same way. So the layman says, I'm still watching. What do you mean? Of course I'm still watching news. But they're watching it via YouTube TV. They're watching it via Fubo. They're downloading the 9 News Plus on their smart TVs. Smart TVs are so advanced now. You have options there. So you can just get apps now and watch the news. But I think it's really, really difficult for not only local media to keep up with it, but I think our audience doesn't sometimes even know where to start.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They're like, how... Okay, you say I can watch it everywhere, but just show me one place. Because it's sometimes so difficult to navigate. Ironically, Xfinity is the largest penetration in this city, and it's channel 657. So I can't even say watch channel 9, right? So there's just really difficult navigation. So I think we've got to get smarter about how do we help, people find what they want to find. Because sometimes they're just watching what they're watching because that's what it was on last night, and it's easier. So brand loyalty is hard to come by more than ever now, just because of it's hard to navigate the media world. And like where do I even start? Like sometimes you want an app to just tell you how to find the apps. You know?
Hey Siri, I want to watch the news.
So I think the cluttered marketplace, I think brand loyalty comes a little bit more difficult. And so if you were to ask this city, a lot of them would say 9 News is their preferred station. But then if you align their behavior, maybe it wouldn't match because they just maybe don't know where to start. Mm-hmm. So we've got to figure out a way to make things way easier for people. That's what cable did. I mean, it was all in one place. And now we're like have 20 different bundle options, and that's tough.
Yeah.
That is confusing.
Yes.
So how are you guys, what does it look like in the next, if you can share, in the next 3 years? Where does 9 News want to be?
Yeah, well, obviously we want to be, the most trusted source in the state. And I think we have a lot, again, of a legacy to stand on with that. Well before my time do we build that trust, but it does take a second to split it. I think also just being and fishing where the fish are and being in front of new people. The state's changed so much. Mm-hmm. So when someone asks me what our target audience is, I mean, I'm probably not going to show all my hands here because we don't want any competition listening.
They'll be watching for sure.
But one of the things that's important for us is to understand that you can't hit everyone. You can't just go after anyone who's breathing. You have to have a very, very targeted approach. Target audience is a huge component of brand strategy, and understanding your secondary audiences. And then here's the kicker that a lot of people forget: the audience you don't want.
Ooh.
The audience you don't want. And the reason I say that is like if we're gonna go all in on trust and we're gonna go on bipartisan, content or information, and you're an extremist, you probably don't belong here if you're trying to pull us one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And so being okay saying goodbye when you live in a results corporate America, that's a hard place to be, right?
Clearly, yes. Some companies have not gone away from it.
Yeah. And so again, it goes back to that strategic scalpel, I call it. So understanding your vision, understanding your values, understanding where everyone is putting their effort, and being okay with shutting certain doors, whether it's priorities or people who maybe aren't for you anymore.
As we start wrapping this up, I'm done with your corporate success and corporate valuable gold nuggets, right? Because we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about that.
Right.
How does a soccer player at Drake make it to be an outstanding woman in business award winner as a director of marketing for a multimedia company in the span of 15 years?
I've been with the company going on 10, it'll be 10 years.
How did you do it? How did you put your cleats down and pick up
You guys
success?
get this being an athlete. So like my whole life has always just been like one foot in front of the other, really, really hungry for my goals. So I was the girl in college who everyone's at spring break. I was going and applying for jobs and doing job interviews. So I was very fortunate to have a job waiting for me after college, where a lot of my friends went and did Europe. And trust me, I still envy that. I'm sometimes like, man, I should have done that 30-day Europe stint.
Call the jet, Techno.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I stumbled into this business. So I was really a client before, and I would always get invited to the parties down in our Dallas station at ABC down there. And I would get invited, and I was like, this is fun. And it was I joke, I worked in kind of the Mad Men. I've worked in automotive. So I was at an agency with Chevrolet. I worked in beer. So I worked for Miller Coors. Nice. And then now I'm in TV. And so I've got the Mad Men, the hat trick. And absolutely loved it. The company's been good to me, but a lot of people forget this. Like, I've been really good at the company. Yeah. And it's a mutual exchange. And this opportunity came up to move to Denver, and here I came. So it's really, really cool. Met my husband here, total home now. Yeah. The community here, what I love about Denver that I've found is it's big city thinking, but also tight-knit, small community vibe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like that combination of that is really, really beautiful.
Such a friendly ecosystem.
It is. Like Dallas was really glossy and like kind of untouchable. Like you could only get near someo's people's people, right? But here it's like I'm having lunch with the Montforts, So it's just a different energy, and it's just become and felt like home for sure.
But what skills made you successful? Like what made you a successful soccer player and professional?
Oh, good question. One is I'm really competitive. That is good and bad. That's my husband. I think, for me, it's a little bit evolved. At first, it was just I've changed a chapter. The first chapter that I wrote, which was kind of in the last up to this point, like 3 years ago, was just hunger. You say yes, head down, like go, get it. You can learn from every single thing. And I kind of changed the chapter because of the point of career I'm in, and I'm moving into like making sure I'm blazing a trail that people can follow. And so there's two things that I think kind of separate me a little bit is one, self-awareness, and in that is self-development. Like, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm totally okay with that. But I'm very confident in what I bring to the table. And then the second is the ability to influence. That to me is, and I think in there people try to bury like manipulate or move, get people to do what you want to do. It's opposite. It's helping people understand what you're trying to achieve and bringing them on board. And that to me are the two things: self-awareness and the ability to influence.
Well, as we're talking about those leadership principles and your leadership position and just the incredible leader that you are, let's talk about like a difficult leadership moment.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a difficult leadership moment and how did you navigate that?
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, tell that story.
I'll tell this story. So, because it has to do with race, and it was actually very fascinating. I work in the creative, commercial art space. So we produce a lot of content and stories. And, sometimes, and this is where inclusivity comes in, we just had a big miss, and I led that project. It was back in Dallas. Gosh, it was like probably 5 or 6 years ago. It was more. Let's go 8 to 10 years ago. And it was right when Black Lives Matter just started coming out. And we were like, we want to do something really empowering inside the building that gets people excited. And we landed on the word matter. And these two things we didn't put together. And in our execution of the project, we did black and white signs. And it was just matter, period, black and white. Well, it was really triggering for 3 Black women at the Dallas station. And obviously hindsight's 2020. Like, of course it was. We used the word matter, and it was black and white, and it was just on the cusp of becoming something. And they were like, I feel like you're jumping on a cultural bandwagon. Like, I feel like it's not the place for you to kind of use Black Lives Matter. And there was a moment I'm like, well, you don't own the word matter. I was like having a conversation with them, but also tell me how that made you feel. And we had a very candid conversation. What I'm most proud about is they came to me. Mm-hmm. I had the relationship and the bridges, and they knew they could use what I valued, which is influence and openness and self-awareness, to come directly to my office. And we had a great conversation. I had to pull the plug on everything. We launched it fully in the entire building. We had a commercial ready. We invested a lot of dollars in it and pulled everything that day. And they even said, you don't have to pull the plug. We just wanted you to know. And I was like, no, plug is pulled. What
did they say, or what in that conversation got you from you don't own the word matter to we're pulling the plug? That's a pretty big bridge.
It is. Well, I had said to them, I was like, help me understand this. I mean, and frankly, like it was the first time I had a very intense race conversation in the workplace. But again, if I didn't have the relationships, it wouldn't have happened. Right. So I said, help me understand I don't know how you don't own the word matter. So, help me understand that. Like, well, it's just really triggering for us. And you don't know what it's like to be a Black woman. And they were really strong and brave and like, were really honest with me. It just took me away. So they wooed me by just their stories, their emotions, at first I was on the defense. This is also when I was just getting started as a leader. And so you're kind of like trying to protect your work. And that was one of the first moments, and I'll never forget it, because it really started how I handle conflict now. Is I want to hear from you. And also, share with me your emotions, your stories, and why it's so important to you. Yeah. If you came into my office with such conviction and the 3 of you got together because you were all disappointed, and you came together and you came to me, like, I can't not listen to that.
Right. Well, some people don't. To your credit, a lot of leaders don't.
I think it's my responsibility, and obviously that was a racial one. I've had those with product flops. Like, we've launched something, we were really excited, put a lot of time and energy behind it. It was part of the long range plan, and it flopped. And you have to put your ego aside and just say, this isn't working.
How do you handle that? So you've had things where it hasn't worked. How do you pivot, and then how do you get back on track? I think that's one of the things that we understand from a sports perspective, but help us understand it from a business perspective.
Communication's key. So when we pulled the plug, I see that organizations do this a ton, whether it was on that internal campaign we launched or this external one. We did a whole rebrand on one of our products about 4 years ago. and it flopped so hard. And I let it. I was the face of it. I was up in front of the organization saying, this is why we're doing this. I mean, so there was a lot at stake for me personally where I was like mortified. But here's the thing, though, I've noticed is when people try to defend something or they argue it to the ground, you just look like a fool. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, what makes people respect you more is you saying, we messed up, I messed up. And I own that. I say a lot of I do a lot of ownership. It kind of disarms people quickly. Like I've gotten, in some spirited conversations with some peers and I'm like, yeah, I effed up. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, so what are you doing this weekend? Yeah. Like it just totally shifts the conversation. Because if ownership to me is key, because people are like, thank you. That's all we wanted to know is that you understand what happened here. And I think for me, the business pivot was just really honest. Again, I went back up in front of the organization and say, it didn't work. Yeah. It didn't work. I think if you let things just kind of, we're going to do this big reveal and then it didn't work. We're going to pull the plug quietly and just hope it moves on. That's where you start losing trust in your organization.
What do you think keeps people, because we know, the one banner we had, the one thing up was accountability. We won the Super Bowl. And to me, accountability brings that trust. What do you think keeps people from being accountable in the workplace?
Oh, fear. Fear is the first thing that comes to mind. I think people are really, really scared they either won't be good enough, they'll lose their job. And I think fear, you have to create an organization that doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. They have to see enough examples of people being brave or people saying what they want.
That's it. Enough examples.
Exactly. And they have to see those examples. Mm-hmm. We get in trouble often because a lot of my peers are the entire executive leadership team, and I'm grateful for them. But we make we own a lot of things. We say a lot of things in the closed door meetings. The staff doesn't get to experience that as much. So we're talking about what's that balance? Like how much is too much? How much is oversharing with the organization versus, so that's tough. Like you can imagine similar with like a coaching staff and players. So finding that balance, but they have to see the examples. And I find sharing them once they're all to bed is the best way to do it. Like you don't want to say in the middle of it, okay, we got to stop down and make sure everyone knows we're changing this. Sometimes it's make the change, and then you go back and explain the process you went through to make the change, and it's already said and done. So it's more of just a transparency thing. So I think fear is a huge driver, and they need to see more examples of where people were rewarded for owning it.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So it's difficult.
Setting those examples is super key. And it's important because you can be like, oh, yeah, we promote this type of culture. But if you've never seen it, then that culture doesn't exist.
Exactly.
So definitely just want to acknowledge that leadership. That's incredible.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Blair. She is Blair Nelson Marlin, 9 News Director of Marketing and the Outstanding Woman in Business Award winner from the Denver Business Journal, on top of a collegiate soccer career. Blair, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. What a great conversation. Yeah, take care.